Yep, that's the stuff. Pangya is an online multiplayer casual golf simulation game made by these two Korean companies. It was released in 2004 in Korea and 2005 in the rest of the world. The game offered pretty standard golf gameplay for the time, but its charming presentation along with even more charming price tag drew players in. Regardless of the fact that, to the people this game was being marketed towards, golf was likely not an interesting subject. Now, as of the time of recording, this game's official servers are almost all closed or dead. So if you want to play it and, actually have people to play it with, the unofficial Brazilian server is relatively populated and for the most part works quite well on modern systems. Links in the description. Now I know I said earlier that this game has pretty standard golf gameplay, and for the most part that is true. You got the token power bar that goes up and then down and bam, you gotta hit that white bar there for optimal precision and a nice dopamine fix. But on top of that, you have these weird and interesting shonen anime powers that range from turning your ball into a mini bomb, making it curve overly exaggerated arcs, and even completely changing its trajectory mid-flight. All of which are executed by inputting button prompts while your power bar is coming back down. But you gotta also have enough energy. Or you could just, take some drugs. Those do all sorts, from giving your energy boosts, slowing down your power bar, to giving your ball more, rotation power. Yeah, we'll go with that. You also have to take environmental factors into consideration. Stuff like buildings that can make your shot go from looking pretty good to, you have wind that can go from a slight obstacle to being a complete game changer in maps that have just a stupid amount of it. Terrain types that have your standard go fairway, rough, bunker, and green, and elevation, shown here in this little green overlay on your ball. It basically means you have to adjust where you're hitting and where you're aiming so you don't just go all over the place. I mentioned the green. Now landing here changes the gameplay a tad bit. Instead of watching the bar go up and down, it now just goes up. The catch is, you see these squares and dots? The dots represent where the terrain is leaning on the square they're in, so it requires a lot more fine tuning to land your shot in this part of the game. Unless of course you take some drugs. The game offers a small but sufficient amount of game modes, like 4-player battles, group versus, local co-op, and 100-player tournaments where everyone is playing at the same time for about half an hour, depending on how fast you are of course. In all game modes, you compete for 3 to 18 holes to see who finishes with the lowest score, or in some cases, who finishes at all. When you're done with a hole or a match, you get these colorful little coins. You can spend them on either lots and lots of drugs or some nice outfits for your character. This game's shop is just so good. I've spent hours in here mixing and matching stuff, and for the most part everything's very pretty. Oh. Well, anyway, here's the issue, right? Remember when I mentioned this game is from the early 2000s and it's free? Well, you can probably see where this is going. It has that classic pay to win, but hey, you can also grind a lot, but even then everything is way too bloody expensive, so get fucked monetization model. Hell, I'm lucky some random guy decided to give me a small donation of 1 million pangs. That way I can actually use some of the other characters and buy them stuff. Well, some stuff. You see, some of the stuff are only available with real money, some are locked off by level, and some are just weird. So far we've talked about buying drugs and clothes, which is good and all, but let's look at some of the other stuff you can buy. Well, there are these companions. These don't do much besides say random shit and run after your ball like an overly excited dog. Oh, and give you a few stats of course. There are clubs. Now this is one of the big ones. A good club can be the difference between making a risky shot and landing in a drink. However, most of them require a pretty high level to get, so you'll be grinding for a bit before you get one. You can also buy some minor stuff like skins for your ball, or comet as they're called in this game, these pads, and some decorations for your in-game portrait. Last but not least, characters. Now these will probably be your first big investment. You start with either this lad or this lass, depending on which gender you specified in your account. They both have different stats, but that doesn't make much of a difference, they're both not very good. Besides these two, you have a very good variety of characters. It ranges from your average Joe, who's actually a cop, this pop star, this magician, this little girl who's actually a pirate, this weird dude who's actually a demon and there's some plot about his dead sister or something. It goes on. Point is, you have a lot to choose from. Granted, you have the capital for it. Let's talk about graphics. They're absolutely gorgeous. Well, for the most part that is. Everything is very well stylized, colorful and bright. The models are good for the time, but what this game really nails perfectly is the atmosphere. Just look at some of these places, everything is just so pretty and relaxing and comfy. I'd be unironically fine with living in some of these maps, they're that good. This game does go over the typical forest, desert, snow, hell type thing, but it throws some curveballs in there too. Like a big old warship map, some Asian stuff sprinkled in for good measure, an entire map focused around fall for those who are into that, mystical mountains, it goes on. I've only shown you a few of these maps, but there's a lot of them. With each obviously having 18 holes, it's a lot of content, especially considering they're all available from the get-go and doable even without any grinding. The music complements the atmosphere perfectly. It's this very chill but driving jazz type stuff that I could listen to for hours, and have. The songs that play change depending on what map you're on. For example, on the foresty maps you get stuff like this. On the desert maps you would get this. And on snowy maps you get basically what you would expect. So on and so forth. It's all very good. There aren't really any tracks that I actively dislike or think that they don't fit what's going on. I'll link the OST in the description of the video so you can check it out for yourself. I highly recommend it. Story-wise, you won't find much in the traditional sense here. The game won't interrupt your shot to give you a cutscene or anything. Most of the stuff you can find on the website and the wiki. Basically, the island of Pangya was all peace and love and stuff until one day literal fucking Satan was summoned and he created a force field around the island. This force field caused plants and whatnot to wither away and die, so the people of the island were like, well, we should probably do something, huh? So they realized that the life force was being drained to Gulf Satan through a hole in the ground. Naturally, they began collecting the so-called spirit force of living stuff and made it into a ball. At this point you can probably see where this is going. Now, obviously they needed to deliver this ball into the Satan hole. Thing is, humans could not touch this ball because it was very powerful or something. So they made these sticks, right? These magical sticks to hit the ball into the Satan hole. Now that sounds easy and all, but here's the catch. The ball grew weaker every time somebody hit it with the stick, so they had to try to get it into the Satan hole in as few hits as possible. Eventually they managed it and rid the land of Ghost Satan's influence, and the story created the sport that is now played in the island as a way to celebrate the past or whatever. That was just the main story to the game. Each character has their own lore and they're all just as silly but entertaining as the one we just went through. I recommend you go through the wiki reading them because it can be quite funny. This game spawned a couple side games, though I couldn't really play either of them. One is a PSP release that seems pretty faithful to the original, but I don't have the console, I couldn't for the life of me to get it working on an emulator. The other is a mobile release that isn't really available outside of Asia. It does however have some updated character models and new game modes, so there's that. Pangya is an amazing game. Though it suffers from its business model commonly adopted at the time it was released, it still managed to captivate those who, despite its not so interesting premise, gave it a shot. It's a shame that most servers for it are now closed, and no one knows how long the unofficial ones will stay up for. I highly recommend that you gather up a few mates and give it a go. It's easy to get into, it's relaxing, and dare I say it, it's fun. Well, that's about it. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice day.